Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Bechet, and this is the AAF Exchange, a podcast from the American Action Forum, where experts provide clear, data-driven insights into today's economic and domestic policy issues. Welcome, and thank you for tuning in. On this episode of the AAF Exchange, the Senate's take on the One Big Beautiful Bill and the economic impact of immigration policy. Joining us to discuss this is AAF President Douglas Holtz-Eakin. Doug, thanks for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, let's jump right into it today. What's been on your mind recently?
I think it was interesting that the Senate passed the Genius Act. That was last night, and that's a bill that regulates stablecoins, a cryptocurrency that is tied to an actual currency, to the dollar, for example. You could have a stablecoin dollar, stablecoin euro, whatever it might be. And if you watch the news, as I do occasionally, like all day, what you see is big win for crypto. And we all know crypto poured lots of money into campaign. That's a big story. But there has to be something more than that, just this horse race story. Like, what is a stable coin and why would you, Kyle, want one? Or I want one? You can hold stable coins and use them for digital transactions, but you could also hold money in your bank account and then convert it and use it for digital transactions. So it's clearly a substitute for deposits of some sort.
Yeah.
How big a deal is it for the banking industry? Why have some people said stablecoins are dangerous and others say they're fine? I'm really just very disappointed in the coverage of the substance of this.
Yeah.
You know, we have digital transactions, we have digital markets, we're probably going to have digital currencies. We might as well get it right in terms of regulating them, but I really think the level of discussion is way too low here. So I'm bitching about everything in the Western Hemisphere. It's fine.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, it seems like to me that based on, a lot of people always talk about, crypto in general as we're in the Wild West of crypto right now. It seems, it seems like the Congress and policymakers are trying to figure out how to deal with this stuff. Is that
That's fair. I think that's fair. I think there's more mystique than it merits. I mean, that's all there is to it. You can convert gold into dollars and dollar into gold, and you can convert dollars into Bitcoin, and so it's another way to hold value. Maybe if your crypto collapses, it's not holding its value. So will it or won't it? That's a stable coin issue. To make transactions. Like, no one else uses paper dollars anymore. I'm the last one walking around with them. But they used to be used for transactions.
Right.
Now we're using electronic stuff. So, I mean, it's part of that evolution, and it shouldn't be that mysterious.
Yeah, I think the most famous thing of cryptocurrency in the past couple of years is, of course, all those athletes losing it in the FTX thing, right?
That was fantastic. I mean, the best part of that is Taylor Swift not getting caught in it because her dad worked for a brokerage house, and she went and said, look, they pitched you on this commercial, and he's like, that looks like an unregistered security, you're in trouble.
There you have it.
Well done.
All right, so let's talk about the DC news of the week. I mean, obviously there's a lot going on in the world right now, but let's focus on what came out this week in Congress. The Senate Finance Committee released its version of the One Big Beautiful Bill. What's in it? How does it differ from the House-passed version?
Probably in millions of ways that I have yet to detect, to be honest. But in the big architecture, it did two very important things. Number one, it made the business provisions permanent. So expensing of equipment, some structures, if they're in manufacturing and they're new, R&D, those provisions, and the pass-through deduction, right? All of the business tax stuff is now permanent. That's better policy, right? Whether you like all of it or not, and I'm not a big fan of all of the pass-through stuff, it's better to have permanent policy than temporary policy. It improves the growth aspects of the bill. And as a footnote, the CBO put out a dynamic score of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act as it came out of the House and essentially said this does nothing, which is what I've always suspected. So, the Senate needs to get more serious about pro-growth provisions. So they did that, and I think that's an important step forward. They also were more, not less aggressive on Medicaid than the House. I don't think a lot of people saw that coming.
Interesting.
There used to be a cap on the amount of revenue you could raise as a state using these so-called provider taxes. And these provider taxes are, the state of Doug, tax you, Kyle, $100. And you give me the $100, and then I give it back to you and say, here's some reimbursement for Medicaid patients. And the federal government then has to match it. on average between 50 and 70 cents on the dollar. So this circular provider tax is a money pump sucking money out of the federal government for the states. We put a cap on that at 6% in the House bill. They lowered it to 3.5%. So it was just a more aggressive, assault on that scheme. But given what you'd heard, that wasn't the direction they were expected to go.
Yeah.
So I think those are two very big surprises.
Yeah.
And then lots of little odds and ends. And, they kept the SALT cap at 10,000. I think that's an opening bid on a negotiating between the House and the Senate. The House ended up at 40,000. I don't know where it's all going to land. But that's what came out of the Senate Finance Committee mark. They now have to actually go in, hold a mark up. We'll see what comes out of that. That's committee work. Then there's going to be negotiations and amendments on the floor, and the process goes on.
Interesting. I know you had an op-ed about Medicare Advantage and all in all this. Did this come up at all in the Senate version?
Not that I saw, and I think that's good. Not because Medicare Advantage doesn't need some sort of reforms. It does. But if you do Medicare Advantage reforms, you should be doing fee-for-service Medicare reforms at the same time. We have a Medicare program. You ought to be reforming the whole program. And my concern about these rifle shots is they get it wrong. The Medicaid provisions are really about program integrity at some level. We're not going to have this kind of gaming of the system. I have no trouble with program integrity provisions. But if we're going to do fundamental Medicaid reforms, like who's in and who's out of the program, that should be done thoughtfully and out of the need for money and reconciliation.
Interesting. What are the main concerns with this package from senators?
Well, everyone has their own concern, right? Senator Paul is like, okay, you're raising the debt ceiling, I'm out.
Yeah.
Done. Senator Johnson has been vocal about the fact there's not enough spending cuts. He wants to go back to 2019 levels of spending. That would be an extraordinarily aggressive move. I don't see that happening in the near future. Others have voiced discontent with the level of spending. Senator Scott from Florida being among them. So pick the person. Josh Hawley's been pretty vocal about not touching Medicaid, so he can't be happy about what came out. The Medicaid provisions, it's still money. It might be a program integrity thing, but it's still money they're not going to have, and less money for places that have rural hospitals is usually the concern. So you're going to see the Collinses in Maine and the Hawleys in Missouri and others line up and say, hey, I'm worried about this.
Right.
So I don't know where it lands, to be honest. Unless you're Senator Thune's staff and you're counting votes.
Yeah.
You don't know.
True, fair enough. Senator Thune and Senator Barrasso just certainly have their work cut out for them on the vote counting part of this. And then also at the same time, you already mentioned the SALT cap. Obviously that's a wide gap between what the House wants and what the Senate wants. So they're going to have to come to some sort of agreement on that.
I think this tells you something about the geography of income in the United States. So if you cut the country into states, inside the states are rich districts and poor districts, and senators on average don't care. But if you represent a rich district, you care about the SALT cap. And so you get a very different flavor of it in the House than you do in the Senate.
Interesting, yeah. And especially with the margins so close in the House in terms of Republican to Democratic votes. What about the bird bath? When have we done that yet? I've been unplugged for a few days.
So it's been interesting. I could have this wrong, and some listener can correct the record, but I don't remember the parliamentarian taking each piece as it came out of the Committee of Jurisdiction and essentially issuing advisories on what was in and out. Mm-hmm. But that's been going on.
Yeah.
And so we've seen bird baths on the pieces that came out of Judiciary and Homeland and all that. Now the Finance Committee, which is the bulk of it, just reported they're going to start in on that bird bath. Expectation is we'll know all of the key calls between now and next week. I always thought in the past they waited till they assembled the whole bill and then did the bird bath.
Yeah.
So
you would know better than I would. So.
But here, what matters is the end game, and so we'll see.
So one of the big provisions in the bird bath that I think has been coming up is the AI moratorium on state regulations.
Yeah, for people who don't follow this, in reconciliation, it should be about budgetary issues. So you look at a provision and say, is this primarily budgetary in nature? So what they've been doing is tying provisions to money. So we're going to have money to the states for regulating AI, but that means you can't have a new law that restricts AI over the next 10 years. Is that primarily budgetary in nature, or is that AI? So that's one. There's some firearms things in there, as you might expect. There are a whole variety. There's a REINS Act in there, which is a regulatory reform. You know, we'll see what makes it over the finish line.
Interesting. Well, we'll have to keep an eye on that. All right, so the big question is, will Congress get this done by July 4th?
I don't care, but I do care about the X date, right? The only thing I care about is, do we endanger the process of raising or suspending the debt limit in a way that makes financial markets nervous and foreign investors less confident in the U.S.? I mean, we've already had 2 strikes. We saw the money flow out of the U.S. after Liberation Day. We saw Moody's downgrade us. This is no time to be messing with the Treasury market. So that's what I'm keeping my eye on. If their 4th of July celebration doesn't go the way they'd hope, too bad. If their August recess gets cut short, oh, my heart's bleeding for you. But let's get it done as needed for the debt limit.
Interesting. All right. Another domestic policy issue that's going on this week is, of course, immigration has been in the news.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that.
Immigration and deportation.
Yes. You recently wrote about the impact of mass deportations on economic policy. How do these recent policy shifts undermine the economic growth?
So do the big picture first as backdrop. The U.S. native-born population doesn't have enough babies to even maintain the population size. So all future population growth stems from our immigration choices. That dictates the growth of the labor force and the composition, the skills in the labor force. It's the most powerful tool of economic policy that we have over the long term. And I think that's reasonably well known, but people never fix things that happen over the long term because they're always a long way away. It turns out that swings in immigration have mattered a lot in recent years. And the biggest example was 2023 when we got this big influx of immigration. It turned out to be a lot of relatively skilled immigration, and it could all work. It was legal here legally, got work permits, and so we had a big increase in the supply of workers. And when you've got an inflation problem, a pricing problem, greater supply is your friend. And so the Fed caught a break. We got this big increase in supply, made it easier to disinflate without having a recession. Fantastic. Since then, the politics have gone the other way, and the Biden administration in its last year closed down immigration a lot. Trump administration has done further. And so just on the numbers, we're going the other direction. And indeed, some folks over at Brookings and AEI have a research paper that suggests that we might actually have negative net migration in the United States for this year, which is unprecedented.
When was the last time that happened?
50 years ago, something. Maybe it was probably during World War II. I mean, something. I mean, I honestly don't know, but that's a huge change, right? So, aggressive deportations, people not wanting to come. Big impact on international students, right? You think of all this stuff. We get a lot of migration for people to go to college and graduate school in the United States. So all of that's gone down, and it might actually swing negative. That has big implications in the near term. There's also the deportations, and we actually saw a manifestation of what has been a theoretical concern until now, and that is the business community saying, wait, the very act of these deportations is ruining my ability to have a workforce and a workplace that's functional and productive. And so in hotels and farm agriculture and the hotel and leisure industry in general, they were complaining to the president about this, and he said, okay, no more raids on farms, no more raids on hotels. We know how hard it is to keep those workers. Utterly inconsistent with the claim that we're going to take anybody who has a criminal record and deport them.
Yeah.
So, they're all over the place in terms of what they're up to, but it is affecting now the business community.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important near-term impact as well.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, so I think part of, this begs the larger question with all, are we seeing a disconnect between Trump's pro-growth messaging around, one big beautiful bill and all of his other economic plans, and the actual economic outcomes of his policies, such as tariffs, tax carve-outs, immigration crackdowns?
I think so. I keep looking at that's what he says. We're going to grow. This will be the golden era of American economy. And then what do? We do tariffs, which are a supply-side shock that increases costs and is inflationary and anti-growth. That doesn't seem like the right message. The immigration thing I just talked about, same thing. It's a supply-side shock, inflationary, anti-growth. That doesn't seem great. The bill that came out of the House wasn't a pro-growth tax bill. Right? It wasn't broaden the base, lower the rates, be especially guarded against taxing the return to savings, investment, and innovation. That's the recipe for pro-growth. Have it be as simple as possible. This is more complicated. It reflects the mentality in the progressive wing, which is zero sum. So the way you get something is we give it to you. No tax on tips, no tax on overtime. Comes at the expense of someone else. Instead of lower rates and everybody prospers, and it's growth in the economy that delivers the benefits. So it's not a pro-growth bill. As I mentioned, the Senate made it better. I'm happy about that, but it's still not in anything like the 17 Act, which was genuinely pro-growth, genuinely simplification, genuinely a big reform. This is not that.
Interesting. Well, Doug, thanks for coming on and breaking that down. I do have to say thanks for not bringing up any sports in this conversation, because it's been a terrible week for me in that regard.
Week? What do you mean week? Do you have any sports teams anymore?
I
don't think you do.
I'm retiring from sports. I'm announcing my retirement as a sports fan.
Well, I mean, the Steelers have been rescued by the ghost of Aaron Rodgers, so I'm in no position to talk.
Yeah. Well, I got to see one of my favorite hockey players of all time win with one of my least favorite teams of all time, and then of course Devers is no longer a Red Sox.
Which I'm never going to understand, but
there's a lot of blame to go around in that situation. But
I'm for everything. I've been rooting for the Pacers. That looks bad. I wanted the Oilers to beat the Panthers. That didn't happen. So I ended up with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. And I'm the fan of a team that's going to have the first Cy Young winner with a losing record. Killing it.
Yeah. It's not a great year for either of us, Doug. Let's just leave it at that. Thanks for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Tune back in for our next episode, where our experts will provide clear, data-driven insights into today's economic and domestic issues. I'd also encourage you to check out any of the links in our show notes, and also follow us on social media to learn more about AAF. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or Google Play.